Today I want to share with you all of the books that I read this year and rank them from worst to best. In total, I've read 35 books this year. I would say it was my DNF era because I have DNF'd 9 of those books, so that's like every 4 books being DNF'd. I think we're gonna start with books that actually are not in any tier. These are simply books that I DNF'd because I realized that I will not enjoy it anyway. I just couldn't really get into the story. So in that tier we have Legend by Mari Lu. Honestly, it was a really good book, but I read half of it and I realized that I'm just not feeling it. Maybe I picked it up at the wrong time. Maybe I will come back to it at some point. Also, The Priory of Orange Tree, Kolory Krwi, which is a Polish book. And finally, Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard. And now let's get into the juicy lowest tier. It's not juicy, but like, maybe I'm the problem. It's a tier where I basically put any book that in one way or another triggered me. And it could trigger me because it's just so bad, but also it can simply trigger me in a way that it's not a book for me and I got really angry or emotional in a very negative way. So that's why I would put it here. It doesn't necessarily mean that this is a bad book, but it just means that I couldn't really feel any positive feelings towards it. I'm going to put all of the books that I'm thinking about right now on the screen. All of them are very different in a specific way, and I couldn't really wrap my finger around, but why am I DNFing every single one of them, even though they're so different? The more I thought about it, I realized that yes, they're different, but they have one thing in common. These are books very heavily focused about mistreatment of women, misogyny, and just everyday struggles that women have in their lives. And all these books are presenting different types of issues women face. I think that for a lot of people, these types of books could actually be very cathartic. Is that the word? It can feel very purifying, can feel quite like some sort of weight is lifted off of your shoulders while reading these, because these are kind of like an outlet to all those negative emotions, especially frustration with men, and these books really reflect that. But I don't like reading about it. That's kind of the point. However, I can definitely see how it could be good for you. I can definitely see how if you feel also that sense of frustration within men and all of the misogyny surrounding you, I feel like you probably would enjoy these books. But again, maybe I'm the problem. Maybe that's the point, is that I feel like I don't associate myself with those characters anymore because I have done my healing already and I don't feel the need to have that outlet for my frustration with society. And then also in this tier, we have almost the entire series of Mortal Instruments by Cassandra Clare. I've done a separate video on that if you want to watch it. I think I would rate all of the books 1 star except for the last one. The last one, surprisingly, I really enjoyed, and I would rate it like maybe even 4 stars. Now we can move on a little bit higher, and we have a tier called Disappointed. This section is specifically for books that had a really good premise, but they just didn't deliver. And so I ended up being really disappointed. I could very easily put Chloe Gong's Immortal Longings here. I already talked about this book in my recent reads video. I would put House of Beating Wings. Another book that I want to talk about is a book that I actually DNF'd, but I DNF'd it very late. I DNF'd it maybe like 80% into the book, and that is Dance of Thieves by Mary Pearson. The reason why I DNF'd it and the reason why I would rate it 2 stars is that I realized that there is nothing happening in the whole book and the book is just going nowhere. In a very brief summary, a story about a thief and some sort of aristocrat. In a turn of events, both of them get kidnapped, and in order to escape, they have to form an alliance, and that is like only the first maybe 80 pages of the book, and after that nothing happens. I thought that since this is going to be a enemies to lovers book, then we're gonna have more tension in between. But they go from enemies to lovers very fast. Basically, the second they form an alliance, they're suddenly in love. Again, that is only like the first 100 pages of the book. I read 80% and I still didn't understand why the main character is with that guy and what is she doing there, because it's clearly said that she is lying to him about who she is, that she has some sort of secret mission. She's kind of like a spy or something. I still don't know what she was doing, and I don't think I would ever find out. So it was quite a disappointing read. And speaking of disappointment, the next book is A Dawn of Onyx by Kate Golden. I actually have recorded a full video about, and I wanted to make a commentary kind of like I did House of Beating Wings, but after I finished recording it and I started editing, I realized that I low-key hated the way it turned out. I didn't end up posting it. However, I still have a few clips of them, so I'm gonna show you them in a second. But let's first summarize what this book is about. It's a story about two kingdoms being at war with each other, and the main character from one kingdom, in order to save her brother, offers her healing powers to the enemy side so that they spare the life of her brother. This book is promoted as a slow burn and villain gets the girl. Would you believe if I said that it is none of those things? First of all, slow burn, just because the main couple doesn't end up together at the end of the book, it does not make it a slow burn. These characters are very heavily attracted to each other from the very beginning, and I mean physically attracted. And the reason why people say that something is a slow burn is because you don't really talk about the physical attraction. You rather focus on the characters emotionally bonding and learning about the other person and feeling more and more attracted to them as the time goes by. That's why it's called slow burn, because you know that spark is very slowly growing. But here from the very beginning, they're like, oh, I would, he's so hot, I don't know if I can control myself. That's not slow burn. And then villain gets the girl. I hate to break this to you guys, but he's not the villain. So he's not even the antagonist in this story, he's just there. He apparently has a really bad reputation. He has a reputation of being a really ruthless king, but he does absolutely nothing in the entire book. I actually believe that he's a bad king, and not bad that he's a bad person. I mean bad because he's just bad at his job. And now cue the clips of the commentary you unfortunately will never see. We gotta go.
Oh god, what is going on? Did King just turn into a dragon? Griffin? Really? My mom wasn't really creative. So wasn't the author.
Slow burn who?
Your theatrical gestures and jiggly breasts will not change anything. Although, the other one at least is a nice view. This is the love interest? This is me reading this scene. No, stop it. Get some help. And some vitamin D. And no, that does not stand for dick.
Another book I would put here is Foul Lady Fortune, again by Chloe Gong. This is a sequel slash spin-off to These Violent Delights, following the story of the twin sisters. I forgot their names. This is a story about a girl who has been injected with some sort of unknown serum that basically made her immortal. She doesn't age, she doesn't need to sleep, and she uses those powers in order to work for this spy company, and she's known as Lady Fortune. The book is actually about her having to go on this spy mission with Orion, who is a different spy, and they have to find some information about the enemy side, and that's the whole book, just them gathering information. And what made me drop the rating from 3 stars to 2 stars was the fact that at the very end it turned out that all the work they did was pointless. because that information was already known. Like everyone knew about it. It just negates everything that the characters did throughout the whole story. The book was very long and kind of dreadful. It didn't have enough action sprinkled in my opinion. Another book I want to talk about might be a bit of a disappointment to a lot of people because I know this book is beloved by a lot, and that is Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. This is a story about a man named Strange who has always believed in these creatures. I don't really know how to say that. And one day he has the opportunity to join a general who offers to take him to this ancient city where those strange creatures used to live in. And so the first 150 pages, I would say, are all Strange's backstory and are explaining how he thinks and why he's so passionate about finding more information about this ancient world. I think in order for anything to happen, you have to read 80% of the book to have one single scene that lasts a couple of pages. I felt very bored most of the time reading this book. I also felt like the romance between the characters feels very insta-lovey, even though it makes sense where these specific two people like each other. He likes the girl because he's fascinated by all these magical creatures, and she on the other hand is very fascinated by humans, and she believes that they're not the bad guys, and she's constantly trying to prove to those other people around her that no, humans are not that bad, like maybe we should try to make peace with them again. So when these two meet and they find this fascination within themselves, I can kind of understand it, but it still feels very weird because you're starting to feel like, are they actually in love with each other for who they are, or do they love each other simply because they're fascinated with each other's species? For me, the only interesting character was that little girl from those blue creatures. Her story, first of all, was so intense and emotional that I could read a whole book just dedicated to her. And you can really understand why she hates humans so much. Her entire story is very tragic, even though she, when we meet her, is very mischievous, very evil, you could even say. She's filled with that hatred towards humans. My personal favorite scene from the book was when that little girl, I think she's just sitting on the bed blankly staring at a wall, and she's just repeating to herself like a mantra, I couldn't carry more, I couldn't carry more. And if you know, you know. That scene made me tear up, I have to say. Another book that was surprisingly a disappointment and kind of pains me to put it here is Chain of Thorns by Cassandra Clare. This is the last book in her newest book series. That's probably the weakest finale book that Cassandra has ever written. I could not care less about the melodrama between Cordelia and James. I've been saying that since book 1. I don't understand why Cordelia is the main character. She doesn't have any personality except for James, which is her love interest. The entire book is just melodrama between these two, as if they couldn't just sit down and talk. The only good thing that came out of this book was Grace. I love Grace. I completely did not expect that she's gonna become my favorite character in this series. Grace and that one other character, you know who, both of them deserve better. I can't believe that. I can't believe we made them unhappy just so that James and Cordelia can be happy. All of the drama and tension and miscommunication really reminded me of Clary and Jace when they thought that their siblings. And that is not a good thing if a couple reminds me of that. Moving on, we have Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. It's a story inspired by the legend about Arthur and Merlin. I don't know how to say this. I found everything interesting except for the Merlin and Arthur stuff, which is like 99% of the book. It's a story about a young girl named Bree who goes to this prestigious school that her mom attended because she wants to feel closer to her mom and potentially find out the reason why she died, because she believes that there must be a reason. Her death seems way too suspicious, and Bree has a hunch that there's something more behind it. And when she goes to the school, she finds out that magic is real and that there are people out there called Merlins that are capable of using the power to their advantage. In that school, there are also descendants of Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. Is that the name of that in English? On the other hand, we learned that potentially Bree and some other people on the campus have a different completely power called, I think, the root magic. And let me tell you, the root magic system was the most interesting thing about the whole book. I wish the book was all about the root magic. The idea of being able to see dead people's memories and communicating with them. I don't know, all of that seemed really interesting, but unfortunately it was just like a very side plot that lasted maybe 10 pages of the whole book. So I also really disliked Sev, I think was his name. It's very clear that at some point Bree is gonna end up with him, and so whenever you're reading scenes with them, you're like, I don't know what I think about that. Sev just felt very much like a early 2000 bad boy. The middle tier is a phrase that I often use in my everyday life, and that is, I mean, sure. So this is specifically for those books that, yeah, totally, if you want to read it, go ahead if you don't have anything else to read. Here we have One Dark Window by Rachel Gilling. I already talked about this book. The second book is A Vow So Bold and Deadly by Bridget Kemmerer. This is the last book in her trilogy, A Curse So Dark and Lonely. Where do I start with this one? It's a Beauty and the Beast retelling where the prince obviously gets cursed, that he has to find love in order to break this curse and stop the kingdom from falling apart, basically. Maybe let's start with the fact that A Curse So Dark and Lonely, I rated it 5 stars because I just simply loved it. The second book, I don't know what happened. At first, when I found out that this is gonna be a story written from Gray's perspective and now he's gonna become the main character, I was actually really excited because Gray was my favorite character in the first book. And then I started reading the second book and I realized that all of the things I liked about Gray are kind of gone. None of the characters, in fact, have the same personality as they had in the first book. I don't know what happened. Like, it felt like a complete character assassination. Also, a huge problem that I had with the second book is that it was completely unnecessary. The whole book is just traveling from place A to place B. It's like a bridge type of book where the first book takes place in one kingdom and the third book takes place in the other kingdom. I feel like this story should have been a duology. And so going to the third book that we're gonna talk about right now, A Vow So Bold and Deadly, I don't know, I kind of wanted this book to turn out to be about friendship between, what's the name of the guy, Red? No, not Red, definitely. You wouldn't have a character named Red and then Gray. I basically wanted this story to go from the romance stories that these boys have, and then the third one could focus on solely their friendship and how they're gonna be the ones to stop the curse, that they're gonna be the ones to fight the main villain, finally realize that they have always loved each other as brothers, that they have really strong emotional bonds, and they will be the ones to defeat the curse. Wouldn't that be so much better? Also, a huge complaint I have about this book is that the villain is so bad. She really reminded me of Amarantha from ACOTAR. Actually, you know what? Her and Amarantha could have just been like twin sisters and I wouldn't even notice a difference. They act the same exact way. They have the same exact stupid motive. Then we have The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. It's a book where a young, I think 16-year-old girl finds out one day that she is going to inherit a lot of money from a very rich man she has never even met if she solves a few riddles. And that's kind of the whole book, is her learning about the family of the dead old man and going on the adventure to solving all these puzzles. She learns about dark family secrets. I feel like it was just a solid read. It wasn't anything special. That's why I wouldn't rate it 4 stars. And then we have 2 books by Stephanie Garber. It's Caraval and Legendary. 2 of them are from the same book series. I haven't read the finale yet, and I kind of don't feel like it. The whole plot of these books revolves around a magical caraval organized by a mysterious magic person named Legend. That is really all you need to know. I feel like saying anything else about the book could potentially ruin the experience for you. What's really interesting about the story is that when the characters finally go into the caraval, you have to stop trusting anything you read. And for that reason, I don't like the book. Don't trust anything you read. You think this character died? No, they didn't. Oh, you think this character is this person? No, they're not. And it's just the whole book is frustration upon a frustration. It wasn't a bad book. I like the vibe of it. It's just that what you think finally is real turns out it's not. And especially what pissed me off in the Legendary, which is the second book in this series, was that the first book ends in such a way that yes, this is the truth. We finally know what is real. And then the second book literally starts off with saying, no, that wasn't true. The second book honestly was probably a little bit worse for me because it just didn't really feel like the continuation of the story anymore. I also hated the reveal of who is the said Legendary because I already knew who he is from like the first book, and I was really hoping that this is not the case, that this is not the character, but then it turned out it is. But then again, who knows, maybe in third book it actually turns out that he's not legendary and all of that was a lie. This book is not afraid to do that. So another unfortunate disappointment, we have Defend the Dawn, again by Bridget Kemmerer. This is a follow-up to Defy the Night. And I just want to rave a little bit about Defy the Night because I love this book so much. It is one of my favorite books that I think I've ever read. I loved it from page 1 to the last page. It was just cherry on top. It had everything I love. It had enemies to lovers, court intrigues. It had morally gray characters. It was just so good. And then the second book happened. I feel like this is going to be the same case as with A Curse So Dark and Lonely, where the second book is literally just a bridge between the other two. Again, Bridget, why did you do that? Stop writing trilogies. It's okay to write a duology. Because Defend the Dawn is literally just like being on a ship. The entire book, you're just on a ship traveling from one kingdom to another kingdom. Doesn't it sound familiar? What really was making me angry is that not only this book had no plot, but also that we yet again have to deal with character assassination. Specifically, in the previous book, Tessa and Korik gets ambushed by rebels, and the rebels almost kill Korik. That's a very important thing that happens. And then in the second book, Tessa, Korik, and one of the rebels, who was the one that almost killed Korik, is on the ship. And then the rebel goes to Tessa and he says that, you know that Korik doesn't actually love you, he's just there for sex? And she believes him? Nah, he almost killed Korik in the previous book. Why are you believing in anything he's saying, especially about the Seth Korik? Like, obviously he hates Korik because he almost killed him in the previous book, and now he's trying to sabotage your relationship and you believe him? It made me so angry because the entire conflict of this book is based on this one lie that this guy made up. And Tessa believes him and refuses to talk to Korik. Korik doesn't know what's happening. He like tries to talk to Tessa, but Tessa's just moody and angry at him for no reason. And that's the whole book. It was just not good and I'm so disappointed. And now I'm really worried about the third book because I kind of feel like it's gonna be similar, especially looking at A Vow So Bold and Deadly, where I had basically the same exact issues. And the last book in this mid-tier is All of Us Villains by Amanda Foody and C.L. Herman. And this book is about a magical tournament that takes place every generation. 7, I think, magical families need to choose their representative, where those representatives will fight for life and death in the tournament, and the last man standing wins it. I thought that the concept of this story was really fun. There was a lot of very dark themes in this book, and I feel like just in general the entire vibe of the book was very dark. So if that is something you enjoy, I think you will like this book as well. But my problem is that even though there were, I think, at least 7 main characters and we learn about every single one of them, I did not like any of them. 7 main characters and somehow I did not like any of them. How is that possible? None of them really gained my empathy. I think it's because this book is so heavily focused on the dark themes that it kind of forgot to give characters positive traits as well and reasons why we should root for them. The only character that kind of had those traits was Alistar and his love for his brother, but I felt like that was not strong enough for me to feel connected to him. What sent me into another dimension was the fact that the book ends like in the middle of the tournament. You would think that since this is a book about the tournament, the whole tournament is gonna be the book, right? The book just rapidly ends in the middle and you're like, huh? And the last 3 books I want to talk about are finally books that are in the upper tiers, in the best books of the year. I originally wanted to do 2 separate videos, worst books of the year and the best ones, but then I realized that I only have 3 best books of the year and 25 worst, so I'm definitely the problem. The next tier we have is No Regrets. This is for books that I genuinely would recommend to everyone and I think they're objectively good. And then finally for 5 stars we have I'm Surprised You Even Exist. That's simply because I have like a very specific taste, and for me to have a book be rated 5 stars, it takes a lot. That doesn't mean that I have a very sophisticated taste in books or anything. No. So we're actually going to start off with the I'm Surprised You Even Exist tier. We're gonna put in this tier Scythe and Thunderhead by Neil Shusterman. These are the first 2 books in the Scythe trilogy. This is a story about a dystopian society where technology and medicine is so far advanced that the concept of death no longer exists. And so in order to maintain a reasonable amount of population, society created a position called the Scythe, which their responsibility is to take away the lives of people. And the story follows 2 teenagers, Citra and Rowan, who are chosen to learn for the position of a Scythe. But key information here is that none of them actually want to become a Scythe because it's against their morals. And so I thought that the concept of the story is amazing, like how valuable is human life and is it even morally okay to be the one to decide who should live and not? Oh, the concept of this is so good. Listen, if you love the Hunger Games and you were looking for a different dystopian that just hits equally good, I would highly recommend it. I wouldn't say these books are similar, but I guess both of them are about dystopian societies. And if you're looking for a society that is actually well written, then Scythe has it for you. And finally, we have The Toll, which is the finale of Scythe series, and I am unfortunately in the tier No Regrets, which is 4-star tier. But I'm only putting it here because of just the sentiment that I have for the series. If I'm being 100% honest, it probably doesn't deserve to be here because this was one of the most disappointing finales to a series I've ever read. The build-up was amazing. I was so excited to read it because I was thinking, okay, the villain in this story is so good to the point that it was the first time ever where I felt terrified of the villain. I, the reader, I have realized that yes, the villain needs to be stopped because what he does is horrible, but if you try to stop it, a lot of the times the situation escalates and it becomes even worse. And he, the villain, takes advantage of that. And so you're kind of thrown in this position where you feel like, okay, if we don't do something, the villain is just gonna make the world his and it's gonna be bad. But then if we try to stop him, it might get even worse because the villain is so twisted and also intelligent and he's a quick thinker. I don't know, it was the first time ever where I read a terrifying villain, and as I said, I was so excited for the tall. I was like, okay, they have to come up with something so good to defeat this villain, right? They literally just dipped the scene. They were like, nope, not my problem. I don't understand how can you end a book like this? The characters don't solve anything. Nothing is resolved. I don't even know how to say this without spoiling anything. My favorite character in this entire book series was Rowan, and I'm saying was because I don't know what happened in the third book. Suddenly he lost personality, he lost all his morals, he lost any reason to be alive. I mean, technically you could say that maybe it's just a result of the amount of trauma he goes through, but I don't think so. I genuinely feel like the author just didn't have an idea what to do with him anymore, so he just kind of exists, especially because Rowan was such a badass in the previous books, and he was never the one sitting around and waiting for other people to do things. He always took things into his own hands. So again, when I saw him just losing all of that in their last book, I felt like it was just out of character. As I said, I feel like the author just didn't really have an idea what to do with him, so he just kind of pushed him to the side and was like, he's there, let's focus on someone else now. And that concludes all of the books that I have read this year. Let me know what are your favorite books that you've read, or what are the worst ones, and hopefully I'll be able to make more commentary videos in 2024. That is at least the goal.